I guess let's start. Hello and good morning, good evening, everyone. Today we have our third talk of the Confiz leadership series. No one is going to come to hold your finger and walk you through the road to success. Everyone has to own Confiz as it was their own baby. So whenever you feel there is an improvement, take an initiative and fix it. So let's hear our Director of Engineering, Hussain Ahmad, thoughts on from organization to organization excellence. Welcome and over to you, Hussain.
Thank you, Usman. Let me know if you can hear me well, and let me share
Yes,
slide deck
Hussain.
as well.
Your slide deck is not there, but I guess I can see
Just let
your video.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Uh, so uh, before we start, just let me give a brief introduction that why I chose this topic primarily. What I have seen over the years is that there are common mistakes that we make, and they are not primarily related to technology that engineers work with. Uh, Most of them are like simple mistakes that have far more consequences than we think. Because to us as engineers, we think that technology is the bread and butter, which is true, which is not wrong actually. Uh, but there is more to technology when we talk about engineering. So just giving this as a context, let me start with the simple concept that we have learned in physics, which is entropy. I'll explain that why I'm talking about it as we go along. Perhaps it will make sense. So primarily an entropy is the measure of a system, how much it is disorganized. The more equations we have in order to explain its entropy uh, or entropy of the system, the more disorganized the system is. Uh, Now, let's relate it to how we can or how I foresee it when I am working with people. I generally ask them, what is your daily routine? Uh, and that primarily gives me a good idea that how much uh, of uh, consistent action or consistent routine that a person follows. I'll explain that why this question and why the derivative. The reason being that for when we are working in an organization or in a company or a team, we have a specific function that we need to perform. And in order to perform that function, we need to have consistent action and routines that we need to follow in order to get that function done and to have it done in a good fashion. So if we don't have a set routine, uh, I I don't like it doesn't have to be a robotic routine, I would say, but it has to be consistent at least. Um, as we start our career, the plain thing that we see is the routine of an engineer, simple software engineer. He comes in, and primarily what he needs to do is this: make sure that the user story or the data story that he has is in line with the requirements, the understanding that he has, and he has to write the code. Perhaps sometime write unit test cases and test it. So that's primarily it when we foresee a simple software engineer doing a very focused work. So it has a consistent action and routines that needs to be performed. Uh, why consistency? Aristotle once said that as it is not one swallow or a fine day that makes a spring, so it is not one day or a short time that makes a man blessed and happy. And uh, I think it was Will Durant who said that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act but a habit, because what we are doing over consistently, over time, consistently, is what will matter the most. And to me, what we do consistently is what yields results in our career, in our life actually. What I have seen is that people put, like, if you give them a feedback, what they'll do is that they will take the corrective measures for a very short period of time, and they expect that, okay, we have done it, so we should get an instant reward. But what they don't understand is that I think that to build a reputation is hard, and to fix it is even harder. So you have to be more consistent in order to fix something that is actually broken in the first place. So circling back, um, why I'm talking about consistency. Um, okay, there are 5 W's that generally we have. It's what, why, how, when, and who. But in on the slide deck, I have only listed 4. Uh, I have left the where one. Um, what primarily is the problem statement that you are trying to solve, and why relates to the objective, why we are doing it. When we talk about how is the solution part, and when is the part I will be focusing on for today's, because it primarily is about scheduling, that what will be done at what, when, at what time, and who will be doing is primarily is a question when we are going to execute the plan that we have. Uh, so uh, Primarily what I have understood is that, uh, to me, organization of the work or organization of myself is a continuous process that involves basically 3 things. Um, and for those, the first and the top one is the calibration. Um, and it has to be like a continuous process. And what I generally do is that I have a to-do list. Okay, that let me rewind back. Calibration is the part which I think is the most important, because if you are not calibrating or recalibrating the situation that you have in hand, then primarily you will end up in wrong prioritization of the action items that you have. And once you have the calibration and the tools for recalibration correct, then primarily prioritization becomes the easiest part. So once these two are out of but once these two are out, all you have to do is just reschedule the work that you have. And primarily, if we can do, or at least I can do these 3 things well, then then what I have done, or the favor I have given myself, is that um, I have made it easy for myself not to repeat things, because what happens is that if you get your prioritization incorrect, or if you have done your recalibration part incorrect, then you have to do something, and then you have to undo it, and then you have to redo something. So that parts get fixed, and you have a lot of time at your hand, rather than spending in doing something or redoing it. And as I explained that, it is a continuous process, and by continuous I mean it is, for me, I do it on daily basis. I'll explain later that what I do.
So, Hussain,
Just,
if you don't mind, can you share some samples of like what each of this mean? Maybe one example for each that will help us to get the point better.
okay, let me share with you a schedule that I have, and I'll explain uh, what recalibration, reprioritization would mean to me. Let me share the whole screen then. Just bear with me for a minute. So on the screen, you will be seeing, no, you won't be. Just let me share the whole thing. Let me know if you can see a notepad.
Yes.
Okay. So here you can see I have a very crude to-do list. These are the things that I have with me that needs to be addressed, not for the day, but this is a to-do list that I need to get out of the bucket. This is the one that I did last night, so that is out. This is a very small to do, not the small one, but actually the things that I need to do. And what I do generally at the start of the day, I sort them out from bottom to top. Like from this, with this one out, then the most important thing to me is this production action items. So I'll reprioritize them. Uh, then this is an email that needs to be sent, and then this is something that is of least important, then I'll just sort them out. This is the part which takes primarily 5 or 10 minutes at the start of my day. And to me, that helps me um, figure out the routine that, not the routine, but the action item that I need to complete when any given day starts. So that's one simple example that I have for myself. So would that help, Asan?
So what is a recalibration in that list?
You because when you start your day, primarily the priority would have changed from the last day to first, because you see I had to because once I get the uh, once I'm going to write something, primarily I am not going to see what is the right order for it. I'll just push it in, just like a stack or queue, whatever it is. So when I start the day, I recalibrate like what should be the priority and what is the situation that needs to be addressed first in terms of priority. So this is the recalibration part where I see that, okay, what needs to be done sorry. So that's the recalibration. That's it.
Okay.
Okay. Uh, and the second thing is that set time for reorganization on daily basis. What I do is that I generally do it on daily basis, just before I'm going to start the day, and that helps me. And by the way, if you have any question, please feel free to ask, because I might run the slide deck very quickly. And apart from having a to-do list, always keep in mind that we have to declutter it as well. If there is something that needs to go out of the to-do list that you have or the panel that you have, make sure that you throw it out, because I think I have few even there after a couple of weeks that needs to go out. Um, what happens is that I generally ask people if they have a to-do list or some kind of planner. The reason for this is that they say that they somehow are struggling with time management, or they don't have enough time for the things at hand. And I say that, do you have something that you can visualize in order to understand the task that needs to be done? And generally the answer is no. And I say that, how do you figure out what needs to be done when? And they say that they have it in mind. And what I have seen is that if you have something written down that you can see and you can play with, it is always superior to having a memorization of what needs to be done. The problem with memorization, apart being that as human beings we tend to forget is that you think that you have a lot to do, but in actual it's not the case. You are just consuming your brain power in order to have a refresh memory that needs to um, tell you that okay, these are the things that needs to be catered for. And to me that is just waste of brain power and the storage system that we have in our brain. Okay. Generally, what I would suggest for people who don't have a to-do list or a planner or something that can help them schedule a day is that there are two ways of looking at something. Either you have, like, if you want to be treated like a senior, you have to act like a senior. This is because something has to come first, and it is the actions that you are going to take that I foresee the most. And in order to get that done, I think the first thing that needs to be considered is the accountability part. You have to hold yourself accountable to yourself. It is not your team lead or manager that should be asking or managing your time for you and things that you need to do in that time. And in order to help to get started, what we can do is that we can start off with small choices for the things that needs to be done. It helps you to give a better feeling that you can control things in your workplace. And what I have seen is that a 20-minute time span is a good measure in order to see that how much focus do we have. And in the idea is that during that time span, you have to your focus should your focus should be as such that it doesn't break. Like you don't have an urge to check your mobile, check your email, or check your WhatsApp or something. So you can fully concentrate for those 20 minutes. And I think that we will be surprised if we start to practice this, that it will be hard for us to continuously work for 20 minutes without our focus being disturbed. And if you count them in the first place, we might get a couple of them in our working day. But as the time progress, that count increases. And the other thing is that the number of those count increases as well. So this is generally what I suggest in order to have a better focus for what you are doing. And don't procrastinate primarily. What you think you need to do it so that you can fail fast and you can learn. If you are going to procrastinate or wait longer to do something, the chances are that it will be difficult to get it done. So the suggestion is to have it done and see if it fails, correct it. Don't overthink it. And the last suggestion I would say is that it has nothing to do, the last thing, it has nothing to do with this topic. I think it's just great advice. So I have just burnt it in. When we receive any criticism or any praise, we don't have to get emotional, especially for the criticism part, because generally we do as people. And the problem with being emotional is that we lose the option of making a choice. So I think that it's really important that we have a clear mind in order to see what needs to be done and what not to be done. Any questions so
Okay,
far?
one question here. Yes, one
So,
question. So actually, I have a few questions. I think somebody else said, so I can wait if somebody else has a question as well.
Yeah, Ahsan, I was going to ask a couple of questions, but I can wait. Go ahead.
All right, sir. So my first question is, okay, so I generally work on a variety of things and openly admitting that I forget quite a few, and somebody else has to remind me, and that's embarrassing. Often, okay, I committed something and I forgot. And the problem is memory is a poor tool, as you suggested. Visualization is better. I also think that Notepad, it works for somebody. For me, I don't find it very exciting. So I am always looking for the simplest way to organize things. To-do sticker looks visually more appealing to me, but it seems like more management. So I'm always curious, is Asana a better option? Is Jira a better option? Is there a better app? Because I know there was a revolution, or at least a revolution on paper some time ago about email, to consider your emails as a to-do list. And I honestly think now that it works best for me if I have an unread email in my mailbox, and I take care of things in that manner. So, like, what is your suggestion here around tooling, or do you think tooling doesn't even matter? What are your thoughts?
Tools definitely matter because you need to have something in order to facilitate an objective that you are trying to achieve. Um, for me, I earlier started with there was a software by the name of Trello. It's a kind of to-do list that you have. Someone might have used it. So it's you have swim lanes that are actually vertical, and you can just pick an action item, have it sorted out. The sorting is visual only, you cannot number them, and then you go through you have them go through a processing pipeline, which is the vertical swim lanes. The Trello is one, and there was one a Wunderlist as well. It's also a to-do list with the timestamp. Like for example, if you have an action item at hand, you can put at what time and date you will get it done. But it is whenever it comes to like uh, binding time with an action item, what I have seen is that is for a longer term plan. It's not for your daily execution of things. As you said, for you emails are important because they have a consolidated view. To me, the same thing goes with uh, a simple to-do list over a notepad. Though I am not a great fan, but I think that for me, going to Jira, sorting things out is a more of a hassle. I can do that far more quickly in the notepad than doing it in the Jira. So it's up to the.
Can and just sounds good, sir. Just because we have more people with questions, I'm going to quickly ask my second question. So it seems to me that dedicated time of the start of the day, where you want to sort out, recalibrate, reprioritize work things, is a Scrum meeting, in my opinion. And please comment me if my understanding is wrong. So I see a Scrum meeting as very, very important, because if I'm going into a Scrum meeting, I will introspect myself. What are my tasks for today? And again, in my mind, or an Excel sheet or Trello or whatever. And then in the sprint meeting, in the Scrum meeting, I'm talking about, this is what I'm going to do today. And it sounds like to me it has two, three wonderful benefits. First, I recalibrated myself, and then I openly shared it. So when I share something, an accountability ticker starts as well. So do you have the same feeling that Scrum meeting is that point where we recalibrate, commit, and focus on today's task? Or do you think this is a more of an alone time and not a public time, or not a public process?
The thing is that Scrum primarily focuses on the project. It doesn't have your full agenda. For example, if you have to take an interview, if you have to do a community thing, or if there is something that needs to be done out of office, then this cannot be reflected on the board. That is primarily focused for the project. It doesn't reflect the uh, action item that you will be performing throughout the day. That covers like 70-80% of the things. Uh, and for some people that works as well, if you have that ticketing right. And if you have like if you are software engineer or a senior software engineer, you don't have a team to lead. When you start going through the ranks, then Jira will become uh, it will reduce it will give you a limited picture that needs to be done for a lead or above in order to get the job done for the whole day. So that becomes the bottleneck with Jira and the Scrum. Sorry.
Makes sense, sir. Makes sense, sir. I'm set.
So I have a comment over here with respect to stand up. So what I have seen is if you are using physical boards as well during your stand up, when your office we used to have this physical board and now we work from home, we can use sheets. So over there, of course, you can mention your technical tasks and you can also mention tasks like if you have an interview or you have an organizational tasks, it really helps in the sense psychologically. So if there is a task that is an organization related, you put it like twice. And the third day you'll be like, I have to get this done because it has been coming on my board for 3 times. So I think having physical boards at least helps in that perspective. And you have to write that, okay, this is the third time I'm writing it. Kind of a thing. Yeah.
Definitely, I am a big fan of writing boards as well. When I joined Freedom Pay, this is the first thing that I did because I think that people had a virtual visualization of what they need to do. Actually, they didn't see how much rescheduling at like daily, not daily, at hourly basis that they are doing, and they need to figure out like where the problem lies. And actually, the having it on the board helps them a lot. But I'll just comment one thing here. As you suggest that uh, a, a Scrum board is different than your execution plan. What we are talking about is an execution plan for an individual. There is an overlap, and in Scrum, the leverage that you have is that you can tune it as per needs in order for a team to perform well. So I have done this in different teams. So if someone opts for it to have a tweak in the Scrum and make few adjustment that helps in individual performance gains as well, then I think it's fine as well.
Great, thank you.
So, San, I have two questions. Actually, the first one actually Ethan already asked. I was going to ask that why are you using Notepad and not some tool? So I think that you've already answered. The second is that you have this list that you see at the start of the day, but during the day, a lot of people would come, they would distract, they would give you more tasks. So how would you prioritize those or manage those?
My simple rule is that if it's under 15 minutes, max 20, do it at that point. The to-do list that you will, if you are keep on pushing things in your to-do list, it will be really hard to maintain it. But I get the point that generally what happens to me, because I have a team of 12 engineers to handle as well, apart from other things to do. Um, it 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 really becomes a problem that like 30% of your 30 or 35% of your time is taken by unscheduled tasks. But I don't think there is a solution to it. What I have seen is that it generally happens in spikes. At the start of the sprint, you have, and in the end of the sprint, you will have a spike of these unscheduled things. And between it, there will be a quiet period. So the way I have done things is that I I consider a long-term plan as well, but that is in my mind. It's in my subconscious, I would say. So I plan my personal things that need, for example, the user story that needs to be done. I plan them in the middle of the sprint. I won't plan them in the start or in the end because I know that I will not have the time there. So having a higher level plan can help as well, but I haven't seen that there is any remedy for an unscheduled things as you move up the ranks because people will come to you in order to have some kind of assistance with the problems they have. Perhaps this answers your question, or if you can rephrase that.
I think that. So what you're saying is that these tasks help you stay focused, but people would still come and you try to get those done as they're asked. And in your experience, it's like 20 to 30% of time, tasks are ad hoc tasks that you work on.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
So I have a question. This is Sadan. So normally what happens is like you have a list of your to-do list actually, and then there are some unscheduled tasks as well, like you mentioned. But and there are some ongoing discussions as well. Somebody can come to your seat and ask you some question, or ping you on Slack or whatever. But if you have some unscheduled task, apart from that, there is also a context switch which is happening between your task and your unscheduled task, and that context switching itself is quite time taking. So what is the best practice to manage this context switching?
Practice, I think this is the first. And the second thing is that I actually say no as well. Ask my team if I'm into code or if I'm doing any POC, then at that point in time, if they come to me, I'll not entertain. I'll say, give me 5 or 10 minutes. And primarily, I'll figure out the context switching time. I won't entertain them, because if you keep on doing it, you will actually hurt yourself and the to-do list that you have. There is always a time for a better context switch. Whatever you are doing, complete it, not wholly, but generally whatever. If even if you are writing a piece of code, if you are writing in like completing a function, just complete that function. Or if you are writing a class, complete that class. Don't interrupt right away. Just find a window of 5 or 10 minutes that can help you to achieve the current task. Even if you are not going to achieve it, primarily that will be the case. Just give it or take it to a point where it is easier to context switch. Don't do it right away. That is what I have seen, apart from the practice that would work in order to minimize that context switch time.
Yeah, seems a good approach. Thank you so much.
Actually, one thought I have is, and I, over the last 10 years, I had the option to hear a lot of performance review feedbacks, concerns, and achievements. One concern after I hear from managers and team leads is that some XYZ individual is working, he or she generally does not understand priority, or they wasted something in an unimportant thing, or they were doing something which was never told and which was not important at that point, which seems to me that the prioritization across the team is not clear. So what is your advice if a fresh engineer first starting their first job, how do they avoid that?
Generally, what I do is that, because I have recently two fresh grad joining my team like couple of months back, the way I schedule work for them is the one that has the least dependent items. This is something that I think covered in my slide as well. Yeah, in the last slides you will see that. I will pick tasks that don't have effect on. There are a few things that needs to be considered when you are actually assigning a task to a fresh graduate, because uh, it's not a same, like if you have 10 to 11 things that need to get done, you need to consider uh, what user story or what action item you are going to assign to whom. Because if you don't have that context, that who can do what better in terms of scheduling, then I think you are making a mistake and you are actually hurting yourself. So you need to know the strength of weaknesses of the person. Coming back to the point that what needs to be considered for the fresh grad, the first thing I consider is that the action or the user story that the person get, it has to be like totally independent. If it even doesn't get done, it should not impact any other thread. So it's a kind of isolation that I have put around that person. So the only problem lies in a consolidated boundary. This is the first thing I do, and the second thing is that just don't leave a person hanging in there. If they need to be rechecked because they are fresh and primarily they don't understand, then this is something that you need. That's the point where you need to put a little bit of effort in order to make sure that the person has the understanding of what needs to be done. Primarily, you can do it for a couple of engineers that are fresh in your team, but I won't do it for the senior engineers that I have, because I understand that they would have built the capacity in order to get things done over the period of time by experience or by conscious learning or something like that.
ठीक है जी, so if I say it back to you, so there are two perspectives again, right? So one perspective is the manager or the architect or leads perspective that you have shared, and that perspective is showing कि यार, let's give them, so let's see their strengths, their competency level at a certain point, and give them the challenge which is appropriate at that point, and monitor. And the other perspective is the fresh or a new young engineer himself or herself. I think my suggestion here is, and do correct me if you have different thoughts, that they should be very open about asking priorities, even multiple times a day. I mean,
Yes.
it's okay to ask your lead that I'm working on this thing. Do tell me if this is not something you want me to work on, so I don't waste my hours or full day on it.
Definitely. This is something that is actually natural to occur. That happens quite a few times if you have a fresh grad in your team, that you will end up saying that once you have something, when something goes wrong, then what I do is that I repeatedly remind them that, okay, waste my 5 minutes. It's preferable than wasting your whole 2 hours or maybe 4 hours of the day. So waste my 5 minutes in order to get the priority set. Don't do anything if you have any confusion about it. I think that's fine as well, of course. Now coming out of the self-management and going to a broader scale, I would say. What is the difference between management and organization? Organization is primarily to put things in order, and to manage as to direct, handle, or control something. Why we are talking about organization versus management? What happens is that generally we are managing individual and teams, and as a result we have to organize their work for them. It should be other way around. We have to organize individual and teams so that they should be enabled to manage their work for themselves. The reason is that if you are going to manage individual or teams, then it becomes a really complicated task. Besides the fact that most of the cases you will end up organizing their work as well. What I have seen in the scrums as well, for particular people, not across the board, that what happens is that if we have some weak candidates in the team, not candidates, we have weak team members, then what happens is that we try to manage those individuals or group of individuals, and the result is that we end up organizing work for them. It can be done for a short period of time, but it cannot be continued as a practice. Reason being, the problem is that company plays processes and operations to rectify the problems that they have. If things are going smoothly in an ideal world, primarily they won't bother about putting up a process or an operation to for anything that is actually working well. So if you have a problem that have risen from managing individual and teams, the problem is that it's really hard to rectify, to get a solution for those incidents, or for that particular group of people. And companies keep on investing valuable resources to overcome these kinds of problems that comes with people management or micromanagement in particular, without realizing the core mistake, which is that they actually don't have to manage individuals. They have to let them organize themselves, and help them manage the work for themselves. Okay. the last slide, I think, is that expanding on the last slide. I think just let me give. I think that what needs to be done is that as an organization, as a company, as a Confiz, we should focus on building self-organized team. And to me, the first thing is that to enable it, the first thing that needs to be done is that we need to groom individual in organization that can manage themselves first, rather than managing any other for their team member or their peers.
Sen, your mic is on mute.
And you're muted.
My bad. Apologies for that. What I have seen is that it's not that it's not given a try, that we let people learn by making mistakes. But I think that once we have a knee-jerk reaction, whenever there is a mistake, we immediately go to the rescue, and we don't actually let the person drown, to see that at what point the person will learn what went wrong. We and the second part of the problem is that we have a deadline to meet, we have a delivery to make. And so in order to assure that, we are trying to minimize the problems that we have in hand. And one way of doing it by managing few people in the team, and that which prevents from having a team that can self-organize themselves. So we are afraid of people making mistakes because of the responsibilities that we have for them or for ourselves. But I think that if we plan accordingly, then perhaps we can enable it. This is the problem I think that someone else was facing as well. Anyways, what can be done is that we can consider few things in order to get this done at a company-wide level. One of this is already mentioned in an answer to the question that Hassan or Umair asked, I think, that you have to isolate the problem first. Pick an action item around which safety net can be placed. This is the first thing that I do before delegating it. I try to make sure, not always, I try to make sure that I have a safety net that can minimize the impact if it gets wrong. The second thing is that I isolate the problem by independent action items, not by complexity. For example, if I'm going to give a fresh grad something, I'll consider complexity, but the first or foremost thing that I'll consider is that how much impact it will have across the board. So this should be the priority other than complexity, because if it's a problem of complexity, you can always ask some senior member to help the person out, or you can help them sort out things for themselves, for them. Okay. And I think the last thing is that don't do it systematically. Don't do it like on your will. Set up a kind of base framework that can help your team members to see, understand, and experience new responsibilities. The way I have done is that during the whole sprint, I have implemented safety gateways in form of meetings. I wouldn't say meetings, calls with the clear-cut agenda items, which primarily are revolved around achieving an objective. For example, after 6 days of the sprint, there is a meeting that takes place across the board, which is drive not which I will not jump into, which will primarily be driven by the team leads, and that meeting has a specific agenda item that they have to run through. It's not like any team lead can have a different format that they can run through. Primarily, they will have a set objective that they need to achieve in that space of time. So have a kind of some base framework that can help them to understand, see, and experience new responsibilities in order to achieve something. So I think in the last, I think that the biggest thing that we don't see, because I don't think anything that I have stated is rocket science, but I see there are a lot of mistakes that we make out of common things that needs to be done correctly. And I think that the single most important line is the one that I have in the last slide, that for every minute spent organizing, an hour is earned. I think we really don't realize that this is the fruit actually, and we lose getting that value. And I think that's all from my side. If you have questions, please feel free to ask.
So I would like to ask a question. So at least in last 5 years, I ran into a scenario twice where you see a team of more than 5 people working hard all day, but either the customer or the on-site team is not seeing output or seeing them meeting targets. So let's assume there is a team of 5 people, which you see they are working hard, or they are in office at least working all day, hopefully working all day, but our on-site manager is not happy and he keeps on saying we are delaying this. I don't think team is like producing as it should. And let's say if you have to join that team, what is going to be your diagnosis process to see what actually is the problem?
Okay. The first thing that I'll try to understand is the expectation part, because it's really hard to come up to anyone's expectation. I'll see that what is the criteria that needs to be met in order to have the client side representative or the manager that we have to get the satisfaction level that is needed. This is the first thing that I'll try to see. Like I'll see the target that we are trying to achieve. Then the second part will be like, what is the daily routine that we are following? And do we have a collective picture of it? This primarily will be circling back to the point that Ahmad mentioned, I think, that have a Scrum board that represents not only the project action items, but all the action items for the individual that needs to be done for the day. In order to see, because if you look at in the black and white, there are only two problems. Either it's a capacity problem, okay, or there is a lots of wastage in terms of what we are producing. So we need to see that, to me, like what is the core problem? Either we are wasting time in rebuilding things or building things that are not actually are prioritized in the first place, or is it a really capacity issue? And the process for the diagnostics will be to understand the routine first. After understanding what target needs to be met, is to see what the team is doing on the daily or at the hourly basis for their day, like how much time they are wasting. One thing I like to mention here is that I have seen that people, a group of people or a team that have individuals that are less focused, they have this problem. Those teams have this problem. Example would be, I have seen engineers that will have mobile just beside their laptop. and anytime a notification comes in, any pop-up comes in, they will have a distraction, even if it's for 5 seconds. But to them, it's a 5 second. The whole context has been switched. Um, so I'll try to see like where are the problem areas, but generally what I have seen is that the lack of focus is the problem. It's not the time. Either it's a capacity issue and lack of focus.
Makes sense. And just to add, it just reminded me that I weekly get an email in my Outlook now which says my analytics, and that is very, very interesting. So what Microsoft Outlook automatically does is it finds out my habits of how frequently I open my email, how frequently open my Teams notifications, and I'm sure that they monitor all the Office 365 tools in that manner. So if I know we don't use Yammer a lot, but if somebody was using Yammer after every 2 minutes, Microsoft is gonna pick it. So now every week I get this report and they tell me how distracted I was, how focused I was, and how interrupted I was. And I think it's a wonderful tool. If somebody is not receiving that email, they should ping IT or they should look into their settings. There may be a turning on option to turn it on, but I highly recommend it. I fixed at least a couple of habits for myself based on that weekly email that Microsoft sends, and it's an automated generated email.
Anyone else?
Mazhar here. I agree with you, but I want to add just one thing, like my experience with that. So sometime I have seen like the client grow with the product as well. So when we are working on the product, they learn from that product. After every sprint, they have a clear vision. They also keep changing sometime. They also keep changing, and that's the way their expectations are changing every day. So if that is happening, in that case, it seemed like the team is doing nothing. So there are a few cases like we were working with Qatar government, and they had the same vision, same idea. Uh, then after the first sprint, that changed. Then after the second sprint, it changed and keep on changing what they wanted and how they were expecting. And after 7 or 8 sprints, they said we had a very clear idea what we want, but that idea they built during the sprints, during the progress of the product. So I guess this could be one reason as well.
First of all, I think that they had a clue what needed to be done, but I don't think that they realized that actually they had a fallacy, because if they are learning every day, my guess is they are not learning. Because if you are learning, that what you need to learn the foremost is that when and how you are going to achieve a target. Like for example, after 2 sprints, if you have seen that you are not getting the output for the visualization or the vision that you have, you need to figure out like what is the problem that needs to get fixed. If they have spent like 7 8 sprints and they still haven't figured out like what's the problem, I don't think they are learning. They think they are learning, but they are not. Especially when you said Qatar, I have worked with Gulf clients. I have been there, and Qataris are one of the most resilient to intellect people that you will find in Gulf. So good luck with that.
So I have another question. So you mentioned that as far as fresh engineers are concerned, in first sprint or 2 or 3, you provide them user stories which are independent, so that the things don't get affected in overall scheme of things. But sometimes what happens is that you have fresh engineers, they are straight out of training, and they have to write code that has to go directly in production. maybe he's the only engineer working on an app or something. So given that scenario, what would you suggest? What kind of ideas would you suggest to implement to minimize risk? Yeah.
Okay, so you have already shot yourself in the foot by placing a fresh grade on a team that is already very small. Um, it the only way I see is that the code reviews, and you have a better focus on the fresh grade or instead of the whole team in order to have a uh, an area that is of least impact. This is the first thing that can be done, and the second is that make sure that that fresh graduate has the least important piece of code that needs to be written, and it can primarily, or the fresh grad can primarily use another piece of code as an example to implement a functionality that is defined in the user story. So there are like 3-4 things that you can do when giving him the work. But if there is no other option, then only code reviews and like a better hand holding or a better focus is required for that individual. I don't think there would be any other answer to that. If someone else has any other remedy, please feel free to share. It will be a good lesson for me as well.
So just a comment on that. So generally, yes, we tilt towards giving the least impactful area to fresh engineers. So I tend to do it a bit differently. So I wait for like a couple of weeks, but then I increase his workload exponentially, because I have seen fresh engineers actually surprise me sometime, many a times, by the way, with a mentor involved, of course, a dedicated mentor involved. That, well, this is the guy you are going. Even if you have a question mark about a semicolon, just ask him. So that actually really helps generally. And I would generally tilt towards, I would just wait for a sprint and then just increase his workload, because again, fresh engineers do surprise many a times rather than taking them through the slow path. Would you agree with that approach, or would you still say that we should wait for like 3 to 4 sprints before actually uh,
I think the two things address two things differently. Giving them workload is actually the right thing to do. If you are like, I hope that you don't get surprised by the bug in production, that the code that they have just produced. Apart from that, it creates the right mindset, I think, in the start, from the start. Um, because before people like go into comfort zone far too early in their career, it will be hard for them to to give them a wake up call. So from that perspective, it's good that they'll build the muscles that are necessary for the long run. But the the other part is that you are also trying to minimize the problem statement that you gave in the first place. That is, you don't have any option but to make the fresh graduate write piece of code that will go into production very soon. So these are two different problems, and the solutions that, or the actions that you take, are generally not in line with each other. There are two different things that address different things, which both of them are right actually.
Makes sense. Thank you.
No worries. So I think
Chale, I think it was a very helpful session and we are over time, I think. So we should wrap it.
Then over to you, man.
All right. So thank you for today's session, Hussain. Tomorrow, our Director of Professional Services, Sayyid Salman Ahmad, will speak to you all on future of agile testing. Thank you all for attending today's leadership session, and I'm looking forward to see you all tomorrow. Have a good day, guys.
Thank
you
you.
guys. Bye bye.
Bye.
Aslam.
Bye.